Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. A very warm good evening to everyone. I hope all of you are doing good. I welcome you all to today's all-important discussion where we will be discussing the best possible way to go forward and make the best use of the remaining days before the prelims examinations so that you are well prepared with environment and ecology and science and technology as well. All of those who have joined in right on time, I welcome you back. I hope all of you know 28th of May is when you will be appearing for the prelims examinations of 2023. Meaning that from today, you only have 85 days remaining before the day comes that you will be expected to write the prelims examination and score a mark that is good enough to take you all together to the mains examination. That is why we are here running this series in which every single day we have been discussing how to make the best use of these remaining days for individual subjects. We have already discussed what should be your strategy going forward for Indian polity, for economics, for geography, for current affairs, and today we will be taking up environment and ecology and science and technology as well. As you know, in this ongoing series where we are discussing how to go ahead and make the best use, we have one more session remaining, that is tomorrow. Tomorrow's session is on history, and remember it will be from 9 to 10 p.m. This again will be a live session where we will be discussing what exactly should be the way forward for preparing history in the last few days. Also, just in case you have not attended any of the earlier sessions, you can find them on our YouTube channel. Please go through them and see what should be the strategy going forward for all these important examinations. This is not it. As all of you know, we have taken up this responsibility to make sure that your first prelims is your best possible attempt, and in all probabilities you are able to clear the cutoff. That is why we are running a very extensive Target Prelims 2023 program in which we will be covering each and every subject. We will be covering both the subject topic-wise discussions and also the kind of questions that you can expect. This, as you know, is a 4-phase program. In the first phase, we will be live here on YouTube, individually discussing what is the best strategy going forward for each and every subject. In this phase, the last video will be tomorrow, where we will be discussing history from 9 to 10. Then we'll go to phase 2. That will be on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app from 9th of March till the 14th of April, where we will be discussing over 400 topics that have been in the news and are important for this year's examination. Then we come back to our YouTube channel for phase 3 to discuss subject-wise MCQs and previous year paper discussion for prelims examination. And then the last phase again will be on the app, where our All India Prelims 2023 series is now open for all of you, where we will be discussing extensively each and every question from that. So without any further delay, let's see what should be your strategy going forward. We will first be beginning with environment and ecology. Then we will be discussing what should be the way forward for science and technology. And in the end, I will be more than happy to take your questions. So keep your questions coming in, whatever questions you have with regards to preparation of not just environment and ecology, but about science and technology as well. Now, I hope all of you know, in the past few years, the weightage of questions coming from environment specifically has increased considerably. And there is a good reason for that. This trend goes back to 2013. Before 2013 and after 2013, there was a very important change in the prelims examinations. The difference was, before 2013, those who had to appear for Indian Forest Service exams specifically, for those interested in Indian Forest Service, before 2013, they did not have any prelims examination as such. From 2013, it became mandatory that those who are planning to appear for the Indian Forest Service also, they have to give the same prelims examination. So the prelims examination that you're preparing for, that is used as a qualifying exam for those also who are planning to appear for the Indian Forest Service. Since the Indian Forest Service candidates also are included in the same prelims, that is from where we see a great bump in the number of questions asked from environment. So a lot of questions are asked from environment specifically. There are questions both from the static part as well as the dynamic part. We will be discussing what to focus on and what not to focus on. The most important story here is environment has become such a topic from where you get a lot of static questions as well, means the different definitions, the different types of concepts, you're expected to remember and understand that as well. And there's a dynamic portion as well. How? As the entire world is becoming more and more aware of climate change, as we are more and more worried about the changing environment trend, we have so many meetings that happen internationally on this topic. And that what makes it extremely important for our prelims examination as well. For example, when you talk about the different conferences, the COP27 recently held, the CITES conference, for example, held recently, whenever we talk about any international financing activity for climate change, etc., all of that becomes extremely important for the prelims examination. So just to give you an idea, environment and ecology is one of those topics or one of those subjects specifically where you are expected to focus on both, that is the static part as well and the dynamic part as well. Just to give you an idea, in the last 2 years, the number of questions asked from environment and ecology are pretty significant. For example, last year, 16% questions, meaning that 16 questions the prelims examination GS1 were from environment and ecology. So this is one topic or one subject that you just cannot afford to ignore. Make sure that you have a very, very strong grasp on all of these. Even in 2021, there were almost 14 questions that came from this part. So every single year, on average, you can expect at least 15 questions from this part of environment and ecology. Now, I am very sure there would be many of you who would think that no, I'm very weak in environment and ecology. I don't understand these concepts. There are many people who would say, sir, I'm from arts background, I'm from commerce background. I read science a long time back, so I don't understand any of these things. I don't understand anything about ecology. I don't understand what is ecotone, what are the different types of species, what are biomes, etc. Now, the problem here is I can't give you an advice to skip all of that. My suggestion would be, just in case you are one of those who thinks that no, I'm very weak when it comes to the static portion, my advice would be at least have a lot of strength in the dynamic part. Dynamic part as in, when you read the current affairs, I hope all of you have been reading our monthly current affair magazine that we issue. Apart from that, I hope all of you also follow our initiatives on YouTube where we discuss the important news stories from the Hindu newspaper. We also discuss a daily quiz. From that section, you can get a lot of news about environment and ecology. So just in case you are one of those who thinks that no, I'm very weak in the static part, make sure at least in the dynamic part you make it up, so that you have a good strength about the factual information, the different conferences that are held, who is organizing them, what is the agenda of the conference, so on and so forth. Now, since we do not have a lot of time before the prelims examination of 2023, my advice would be to focus on some of these topics. Now, remember, this list of topics that I have compiled for you, the topics that are relevant for this year's examination, this list may not be applicable to those who are planning for 2024 or even further attempt. So if you are one of those who are thinking that no, I will only appear for prelims in 2024 or 25, etc., then for you, I would suggest you do a much more holistic and in-detail study of all the topics. But for those who are planning to appear for 2023 prelims, that is about 85 days away, for you, I would highly advise you to focus on these topics. For example, biodiversity. And there's a reason why all these topics I mentioned here. Biodiversity, again, one of those topics that remains in the news time and time again. The government of India, for example, has been trying to make a lot of effort. I'll give you a few examples. The cheetah relocation program that we saw, for example. We see a lot of government efforts to ensure that there's preservation of environment, that we go ahead and give a lot of respect to all these sensitive areas, be it the Western Ghats, etc. All that becomes important. Climate change, an ever important issue. Now, climate change is a very, very wide topic. For example, in climate change, you have to understand the impact of climate change, the reasons of climate change, also the efforts taken not just by the Indian government but internationally. What are the efforts taken in order to ensure that climate change is averted? One other issue in climate change is about the funding part. From where are we getting the funds? Is there any international agency that is looking after the funding part of it? Because that time and time again comes in the news. Also focus on general issues of environmental ecology. So for example, you must know concepts of ecotone, you must know concepts of niche ecosystem, what is environmental deterioration, how does it impact human beings, what are the different government initiatives that have been taken by the government of India against it. Now, in simple terms, in order to get a lot of this information, if you follow most of the current affair initiatives that have been taking place at our channel, you would be good to go and you will be able to cover most of them. Then, pollution. More specifically, talk about the ozone hole. If you remember, just a few months back, there was a news that the ozone hole is healing at a very fast pace, which is a good news. So that becomes important. Apart from this, the control of acid rain, photochemical smog, all these environmental based issues remain important. Also focus on IUCN, the biodiversity hotspots, not just in India, but also around the world. Those hotspots that are in the news, those hotspots that have been the topic of discussion all around. Focus on those places specifically where wildlife conservation has been at the center of attraction. Maybe national parks, the Kuro National Park, for example, so much in the news in the entire year. Wildlife conservation, the wetlands. The government of India, for example, in the budget also you saw the government of India focusing a lot on conservation of wetlands. These are the indications from the side of the government itself which topics are important. When there are certain topics that become a part of the budget speech, when there are certain topics which are discussed time and time again, that also becomes extremely, extremely important for all of you. So since wetlands has been in the focus of the government, please make sure you read about the different government initiatives for wetlands, read about Ramsar Convention as well. All these become extremely important. Then focus also on the government's initiatives in the field of renewable energy. Very, very, very important how the government of India has been trying to give a push to, for example, the green hydrogen program, how we have been trying to give a push to renewable energy. The budget also, again, if you remember, budget had different themes. One of the themes was mainly about how green energy can be utilized in a much better manner. The government of India focused on green growth, so that also becomes extremely important. Then regulatory bodies, which are the bodies which are looking into environmental conservation in India, any new policies that have been introduced. Similarly, international organizations working in this field, including the UNESCO, FAO, UNEP, etc. All these are topics which I would like all of you to have a very, very strong grip on. Now, apart from this also, there are certain other things that I would advise you to do from my end. For example, number one, I would advise you to focus a lot on international conventions. If you look at the UPSC Prelims papers in the past few years, the UPSC has asked a lot of questions on international conventions and treaties that have been signed. Now, there are two ways to look at it. Number one, I would advise you to remember all those that are in the news in the past 18 months. In the news in the past 18 months. For example, the COP27. That was the UNFCCC Conference of Parties. Then there was again a Conference of Parties of CITES Convention. All these are initiatives where India plays a major role. So make sure that you read about those initiatives, especially which are in the news in the past 18 months or so that have been conducted recently. Secondly, my advice also would be, historically, there are a lot of conventions in the field of environment. Try and make a list of them chronologically. List them chronologically. For example, and it will take some time, but not a lot of time. For example, starting from the Stockholm Convention of 1972, I would advise you take a piece of paper and try and make a list of all the important conventions starting from the Stockholm Convention of 1972. How and why? Now, what are the things that you should focus on? In these kind of conventions, for example, focus on what was the agenda or what exactly was the aim, which is the organization that is behind these kind of initiatives. For example, if there is an initiative behind which there is UNFCCC, then read about that. On the other hand, if there is an organization which is supporting some other initiative like sites, etc., remember those as well. Thirdly, also remember about the funding part. From where exactly are they getting funding? Because the funding part remains at the center of controversy when it comes to the debate between developing and the developed world. So talk about funding, from where will it get funding, where will it get support, and also its impact specifically, or has there been any specific impact? For example, when you talk about the ozone hole that is now being repaired at a very, very fast pace, the world around the countries appreciate the fact that there have been very, very few environmental conventions that have been successful. One of the environmental conventions that have been successful has led to the ozone layer once again repairing on its own. So make sure that you read about what are different types of conventions, what are the aims, what is the organization that is funding it, how are the funds being allocated to it, what is the impact altogether. All these in environment and ecology become extremely important. Now, one more thing. Most of you, and as I told you earlier as well, whatever I'm advising to you, whatever I'm suggesting you over here, specifically all these are keeping in mind that you are planning for the 2023 attempt. If you have in mind that you will be attempting something later on, then I would advise you to go ahead with a much deeper study. But on the other hand, if you are one of those who are planning for the 2023 attempt only, that is where you can restrict your scope of studying and you can focus on the topics that we have discussed right here. Now, before I move on to the science and technology part of it, let me first take up a few questions from environment and ecology specifically, and then we'll move on to the science and technology part of it. One question that I have is from Swapnil. Swapnil's question is, what is the strategy of revising environment and ecology and science and tech, and how many hours should be given to both subjects? Let's first come to the second part. The second part of the question was how many hours should be given to each subject. See, it all depends on how many hours you gave earlier when you are reading these subjects for the first time. So if you are reading these subjects for the second or third time, if you have already read them in detail, you have all your notes that are compiled with you, in that case, obviously, you will not take a lot of time. The one suggestion I would have is, many people, unfortunately, kind of ignore environment. For example, and you would also agree to this, most of us pay a lot more attention to subjects such as history, such as geography, economics, polity, etc. And we think that the number of questions asked from environment would not be that high. But that is a strong misconception. From environment, on an average, 14 to 15 questions now are being asked year after year. So this is one subject that you just cannot afford to ignore. The amount of time that you are allocating to other major subjects, be it history, geography, economics, you have to match that time here as well. So I can't tell you how many hours specifically should be given. It really depends on what is your speed, what is your understanding. For some people, let's say polity is very easy, so they can afford to give lesser hours to polity. For some other people, let's say history is easy, so they can afford to give lesser hours to history. So that is up to you. The second part of the question was the strategy for revising science and tech and environment and ecology. As I told you, for environment and ecology specifically, make sure that you have a strong enough hold on both static and the dynamic parts. I would suggest you, if you have already read about the static part, you understand how it all works, you can focus more on the dynamic part. So the current affair magazines, for example, that you have been following, if you have been following our, let's say, the Prelims 2023 test series, if you're a student of that, then focus a lot on the questions that are being asked. The last few tests, as you know, of our 2023 Prelims test series will be open for everyone. Attempt those as well very, very seriously. See how much are you scoring there. Because the more questions that you try and answer, the better you will become. So focus a lot on current affair magazines, focus a lot on the news in the past few months, and then try and solve questions from that. Then I have a question from Sai Krishna. He says, which static part is more important? So I showed you on the slide as well. These are the static portions I would really advise you to focus on. Nothing that is out of the blue, the same things that you have been studying in environment all along. Make sure that all these are topics where you are pretty comfortable. Because in a lot of these questions, the kind of question that you might get in the prelims are based on certain concepts. For example, there may be a question on acid rain, the components of acid rain, how is it formed, the reasons behind it, etc. There may be a question on, for example, definition of ecotone. There may be a question on biodiversity hotspots, how do you identify them, what is the criteria, all those kind of things. So make sure that you have a good grasp on these topics as well. What is the criteria for wildlife parks, then what are the laws regarding this. For example, we have the Environmental Protection Act. So how does that work, the important provisions of that act, talk about the regulatory bodies. All these are static parts that I would expect you to have a good grasp on. Then one more question that I have. For science and tech, I'm not taking questions because I want to first wrap up the environment and ecology part. After that, when we go to science and tech, then I'll take your science and tech questions as well, so don't worry. Chinmay has a question. For science and environment, is current affair enough, especially BYJU'S Prelims Value Addition series? As I said earlier, I won't say that current affairs alone is enough, because if you don't have a basic understanding of different concepts, then current affairs alone might not be really helpful for you. Yes, current affairs are necessary. Current affairs now form a very, very important part of your preparation in any subject whatsoever, including environment. But I would not say that start from current affairs only and forget the static part, because that might not be very helpful for you. Yes, you can decide for yourself that I will put more focus on the current affairs part and lesser focus on the static part. That's a decision that you would have to take, but I would not suggest that. That is entirely up to you. I would suggest giving a lot of importance to both static as well as the current affairs part. Nashra has a very tough question. The question is, I have not even touched environment, what to do now? Do I only follow current affair? Is it enough? If you are planning for 2023 and you have not touched environment so far, I have two important suggestions for you. Number one, focus on the test series, solve as many tests as possible. That will really help you in understanding the kind of questions that are asked. When you go through the explanation of the test series, you also get to understand a lot of concepts which you might not understand earlier, number one. The second thing that I would advise you here is, if you have not attended or if you have not even touched environment, that would be focus on current affairs part. Yes, go through the current affair magazines. There are environment related news specifically. In the current affair magazines also, you will see at least certain background of concepts is given. So that should be good enough. It's not something that I would recommend that this is the perfect strategy if you're preparing for 2024. But if you're in that situation, you have not even started, then focus on test series and focus on current affair magazine. That should be pretty good enough for you to take you closer to the expected marks. Then I have a lot of questions on best book. See, there is no one specific book that I would say is the most amazing book or the perfect book. You get a lot of material in the market. You get the BYJU'S Current Affair magazine also that is available for all of you to download. You can do that as well. You get NCRTs as well, which have a lot of good concepts. So not any one specific book that would be the whole sole answer to this. So you are free to read the NCRTs, you are free to take up these topics and even read online. That would be good enough. choosing one specific book over the other would not really determine whether you fail or pass the examination. Trust me on that. Okay. Perfect. Let's then move on to science and technology part. Now, this was about the environment and ecology part. My 2 cents, what do you have to do in the last remaining 85 days or so? Let's now focus on science and technology. Now, science and technology again is one of those topics where people have very divergent points of views. There are some people who say that because they have arts background or commerce background, many people do not feel very comfortable with science and technology. But on the other hand, there are some people who have a science background feel much more comfortable. Now, I want to talk to both of these groups. The ones who feel that because they don't have a background in science, they might have a difficult time in understanding these concepts, I would not really 100% agree. Yes, there are a few concepts, especially in general science, that you might find difficult to understand if you are not from science background. But the fact is, most of the questions which are based on technology specifically are not very difficult to attempt, even if you are someone from arts or commerce background. Now, in terms of science and technology also, the number of questions coming in the last few years are not very low. For example, on an average, about 10 to 12 questions are being seen from science and technology year after year. In some years it has even increased, but on an average, at least 10 to 12 questions you can expect from science and technology. Now, for science and technology, there is one other point that you have to understand. What do you have to study? What do you have to focus on specifically? Now, let me clarify one thing here. For science and technology, there is a big debate, that is, and I'll come back to these points of importance as well. The big debate is whether static portion is important or dynamic part is important. For environment in ecology, as I told you earlier, for environment in ecology, it is almost the same. You have to focus on the static part as well and the dynamic part as well. However, when it comes to science and technology, the dynamic part, that is and if you don't understand dynamic means something that is based on current affairs. When it comes to science and technology, the current affair based part, dynamic based part is much more important as compared to the static based part. I'll give you a few examples, okay? Let's assume you are talking about space technology. Let's take a simple example. Or you have read about universe. Now, these are slightly related topics. I'm not saying the same, but slightly related topics. For example, if you talk about universe specifically, you read about universe in general science and science and technology, you do not see a lot of questions from here. For example, there's a little chance that you would get questions about, let's say, the life of a star, how do stars die, how are the stars born, the different stages of stars, of lives of stars. They can be asked, but there's a lesser chance. On the other hand, for space technology, for example, the new missions that have been carried out, the new satellites that have been carried out, those parts become much more important. You see a lot more questions from this part. For example, you see a lot of questions on PSLV, on GSLV, on different space missions. Now, for example, ISRO is focusing a lot on Gaganyaan. So those kind of questions become important. So in science and technology, what we have seen in the past is dynamic portions much more important as compared to the static part. That is the first debate. The second debate, and I'm already seeing a lot of questions in the chat on that. The second big debate is, sir, how to go about general science and what about the technology part? Which is more important? So for those who don't know, general science also is a subject in which you are expected to read basics of physics, chemistry and bio. This is what general science is. That you're expected to read about the basics of physics, basics of chemistry, basics of biology. Now, usually, a lot of people ignore this part, a lot of people don't study. And the reason is that you do not see a lot of questions from this. For example, if you look at the official syllabus, you might be expected to read about, let's say, very basic concept of physics, let's say force, energy, etc. In bio and chemistry also, you are expected to read about the basic topics, but usually you do not see a lot of questions from here. At max, you usually see 2 to 3 questions at max from the general science part. That is also the maximum limit. Usually you would see much lesser questions from general science part. On the other hand, the questions from the technology part are much more. Now, technology part, for example, can be a lot of things. Technology part can be, as we discussed, about space tech. Then there are a lot of emerging technologies as well that we keep on hearing about, be it crypto, for example. AI has been so much in the news this year. The chat GPT, everyone talks about it. Many of you might have used it also. So AI has become extremely important. These kind of emerging technologies. Then, for example, you talk about the GM crops, biotechnology. Those parts, that is from the technology part, new advancements that have happened, they are much, much more relevant as compared to the static portion of the general science part. So my advice would be, for environment and ecology, the first portion that we discussed, focus on both, that is the static part and the dynamic part. Both are extremely important, both are equally important. However, when it comes to the science and technology part, I would advise you to focus much more on the technology part. For general science part, there are two approaches that students take. As I told you, one approach is many students just leave this part. There are many students who have a very big fear of biology, chemistry. Even when they were in schools, many people did not read bio or chemistry. They were very scared of it. If you are one of those and you want to leave that part, the choice is entirely up to you. You can, because there are not a lot of questions that are asked in the prelims examination from this part. The other reason being, understand this, and this is especially true, and you have to understand this if you are giving the prelims for the first time ever. In the prelims examination, you are not expected to answer all the 100 questions correctly. Now, when I mean this, I mean to say, even the best of students, those who get the highest marks in prelims, even if you get, let's say, 70, 72 questions correct, that is good enough score for you to clear the cutoffs. So even if you at the end of the day think that I am weak in certain area, that there are certain questions I'm not able to attempt, don't worry about it. Please understand this, and I'll repeat this very, very slowly. If you have to clear the prelims, you are not expected to answer all 100 questions correctly. That is not important. As long as you can answer 3/4 questions correctly, as long as you can answer about 70 questions correctly, no one can stop you from clearing the prelims examinations. So the choice is yours. In the end 85 days, what to focus on and what not to focus on, where do you want to spend most of your time, that is something that you have to decide. So if, for example, today you think that I will leave some part, that I will not read about general science, that is entirely up to you. That is a decision that you would have to take. Because again, that is a decision that would determine how are you utilizing your remaining few days. So focus on technology much more. From science and tech part, my suggestion would be to focus a lot on these because they are very, very regularly asked. I'll give you some examples. For biotechnology part, again, very important, GM crops, for example, very important. When you talk about GM crops, GM mustard was so much in the news this year. The government of India, as you know, has now almost given the go-ahead for GM mustard. It might become one of the first or the first GM crop that can be consumed in India. Then defense, again, extremely important. For defense, I would advise you to focus a lot on missiles, the different types of weapons that we have. This was also a year when submarines and aircraft carriers were a lot in the news. So read about that as well. For example, in the past, we have seen a lot of questions on missiles. I'll give you some examples. What do you have to focus on missiles and what do you have to read? So when you talk about missiles, the kind of questions that you have are, number one, what kind of missile is it? What kind of missile means? Is it cruise missile or is it ballistic missile? Secondly, remember or make a table about the range of missiles. So the main missiles that we have, focus on that. The range of the missiles. Then apart from that, what is a variant? For example, is it surface to air? Is it air to air? Is it air to surface? What exactly is the kind of missile? Then, is the missile indigenous? Meaning that are we making it ourselves or is it something that we are making with some other country? For example, Agni is different, Prithvi would be different, BrahMos missile will be different. This is also important. Why? Because in the past few years you would have seen the government of India is pushing a lot towards export of defense weapons as well. Indian government is now trying to sign deals with many countries around the world to export our weapons. For example, BrahMos is a lot in the news because multiple countries have shown interest. Philippines, for example, has shown interest. There is one more equipment made in India, which is now almost in demand, I would say, in many other countries, that is Tejas. The light combat aircraft Tejas that we have made, that is also in news in many other countries. The government of India, as you know, as a policy, has also said that we want to have $5 billion of export in weapons by 2024-25. Because of all of this, defense sector has been a major news creator in the past year or so. Indian government trying to export a lot of weapons, Indian government trying to see where can we find different types of buyers, Indian government also making a goal that we want to go ahead and achieve our $5 billion export goal. So all that makes the defense sector very important. So make sure you focus on that as well. We also had the Prachand helicopter that again was in the news. So a lot of these things, because they are in the news, remain very important. Then space programs, again extremely important. In the past, there have been so many questions on space program. Remember, not just India, but international space programs are asked. Not just India, but international space programs are asked. For example, in the past, there have been match the column questions. For example, they will give you in one column names of different missions by NASA, some from Russia, some from Japan, some from Europe, and they will then ask you match the column, which side is responsible for making which kind of a mission, etc. In India, for example, there have been some missions in news. Gaganyaan, a lot in the news. ISRO delayed it multiple times. Gaganyaan would be India's first attempt to send humans to space. Then we also have the NISAR mission that is in the news. It's a joint collaboration between NASA and ISRO. There are a lot of such missions that remain in the news time and time again. Because of the Ukraine-Russia war, we have also seen the International Space Station has been in the news because Russia says, we would not collaborate with any other country in the International Space Station. International Space Station, as you know, runs with a collaboration of multiple countries coming together. So all of that makes it in the news. Then diseases, again something that have been a part of our lives, especially in the past few years. Read about that, read about the major diseases that are coming up, viruses, or if let's say there's a new disease that has come up. For example, there was a new virus that came up. Now, if there is a new disease that comes up, what you are expected to remember is what is the cause for that disease. Is it a viral disease? Is it a disease caused by bacteria, fungi? What are the different diseases that are coming up? If they are in the news, then read about those as well. And then information technology. As I told you earlier, information technology is something that remains in the news for a lot of reasons. Be it crypto, be it AI, be it robotics. There have been a lot of questions or there have been a lot of news stories running around about the AI age. The government of India, for example, has also in the budget made many statements about 5G being given a push in India, AI, that is artificial intelligence, given a push in India. All these are topics that you would have to read. Now, if I suggest you a certain book for science and technology, I don't think that would be fair. My advice has usually always been to prepare specifically about science and technology in a holistic manner. If you follow current affairs religiously, if you follow current affairs using the monthly current affair magazines, if you have been following the current affairs initiatives, trust me, about 80% questions on science and technology can be answered very easily just by following current affairs. So I would advise you highly to follow current affairs for science and technology as much as possible. There are certain static parts as well. For example, you may be asked about the difference between PSLV and GSLV. What is the major difference between the two in terms of the concept? You may be asked about, let's say, differences between a cruise missile and a ballistic missile, the major differences. You may also be asked about, let's say, the nuclear program that we are running. That also can be asked, what are the different stages of the nuclear program, how important that is. But my advice is, if you focus a lot on the current affairs related to science and technology, the static part automatically gets revised with that. Because mostly, if you are following a good current affair magazine, if you're following, for example, the BYJU'S current affair magazine, you would see that when there is a news about certain topic, the background story, that is the static part, is also given there so that you can revise from there. So my advice would be that yes, focus a lot on the current affairs because the static part can be covered from there as well. Keep an eye on specifically what announcements the government made in the budget, because that will be very, very important. Usually what happens is we think that the budget is only for economics, but that is not true. Budget is not just for economics and budget is not just for the government schemes. The budget gives you an idea what is it that the government is focusing on. So as I told you, in the budget, there are many important keywords that the government focus on. Since the government entirely focus on green growth, so for environment point of view, read about the announcements in green growth. That is extremely important, be it wetlands, be it safeguarding forests, etc. Similarly, the budget announcements about technology, setting up of different labs. The government announced, for example, the AI labs will be set up. The government announced about 5G being given a push. That gives you a very good indication what is it that the government's main priority. So if you go and align your preparation with the government's priority, if you go and align your preparation with what is in the news, your preparation will be much, much better. This is my suggestion from the science and technology part as well. Again, try and attempt as many tests as possible. The more that you test yourself, the better prepared you will be. Please understand this. You will not clear the UPSC examination because you read the most number of books. How many books you read, for how many months have you been preparing, that does not really matter. You will clear the UPSC examination if you were the one who solved the most questions. So focus a lot on solving questions as much as possible. That will be extremely helpful for you in clearing the examination. Now, I'll take up any question that you have regarding science and technology and regarding the environment as well. So feel free to ask those questions. Let's get to those questions. I have a question from Santosh. Is general science important because I have not even touched yet? As I told you earlier, general science is a part of the syllabus. So I can't say general science is not important. It is a part of the syllabus. However, usually what happens is in general science, maximum you get 2 to 3 questions in a year. Now the choice is yours. Meaning that if you think I am so strong in other subjects like polity, history, economics, that I will be able to attempt or get at least 80% of questions in those subjects correct, then you can afford to miss general science. That is what my suggestion is. Whether you can skip general science or not depends upon how strong you are in other subjects. If you think you can catch up marks in other subjects, if you think that you will be able to answer most of the questions in science and tech part, you will be able to answer most questions in history or polity part, then you can go ahead and skip general science part. Because mostly or at max there are 2 to 3 questions. That is also in the best year. Many years you don't even have one question, you have one question maximum or even two questions. That also happens. So if you want, you can skip that, but again, the decision has to be yours. I think there's a following question from Santosh only. What portion has more weightage, science, technology, space technology or general science? As I told you, space technology is not one specific subject. General science is a specific subject. Science and tech is another subject. Within science and tech, we have space technology. So science and tech always has much more part, much bigger part than general science. General science might have one or two questions each year, but from science and tech, you will get at least 10 to 12 questions each year. So if you are focusing on science and tech in such a way that you will be able to get 80% questions right, yes, you can skip general science if you want to, if you have not started till now. But again, the decision has to be yours completely. Then I have a question from Aarti. Aarti saying the social issues, governance, internal security, current affairs are also asked or not. See, if you talk about these subjects that you are mentioning here, social science, governance, internal security, officially they are part of the main syllabus only. So officially they are not a part of the prelim syllabus. However, what happens is, if you look at the prelim syllabus, you will see in the prelim syllabus there is one line that UPSC has added in the end. The prelim syllabus says that any international or national event of importance. International or national events of importance. This is the part of the syllabus. Now the problem is, when you talk about events of importance, that can be from any part. So you can assume that no, internal security will not be asked, social issues will not be asked because they are not a part of the prelims exam, they are part of the mains exam syllabus. That is fine. But the reality is, if there are some events of importance, and events of importance can be, let's assume there's a government scheme, or there's a, let's say, a new law that is a part of, let's say, social security or governance, then it can be asked very easily with internal security also. Now, for example, let me give you a simple example. In internal security, usually, for example, you read about Naxalism. Now, if in the mains examination you can have question about the background of Naxalism, the problem in Naxal areas, that can be asked in mains exam only. But if the government, for example, announces a new scheme, especially for Naxal areas, if the government of India announces a new initiative, especially for the Naxal areas, then that can be asked in the prelims examination. So yes, on one hand, internal security, governance, social issues, etc. are a part of the mains exam syllabus. But if there is an important announcement that has come in from these questions also, they can be asked in the prelims because of this. Because the syllabus says national and international events of importance can be asked. So I would not ask you to rule that out. But yes, I would advise you focusing on the current affairs will be, and if you focus just on the current affairs, you will be able to answer questions from these subjects also in the prelims examination because they are mostly current affairs based as such. Then I have a question from Vineet. Can we rely on the dynamic part? Vineet, I'm not sure which subject you're asking from. If your question is regarding science and technology and that is what you're asking, can we rely only on the dynamic part? You see, the word only is a very difficult word here. Because if I say yes, only rely on dynamic part, don't read static part, that is not really the best way forward. But yes, in the last remaining 85 days, yes, go ahead with the dynamic part only. But if you were starting your preparation now for 2024 attempt, then I would have said for science and tech also, make sure that you have at least some basic understanding of these concepts as well. So it really depends on which boat you are in right now. If you are one of those who are right now going ahead for the 2023 attempt, focus only on the dynamic part, you will be good to go. But if you are someone who is planning for the later attempts, then I would say at least have some basic knowledge of background as well. Then I have a question from Satya Narayan. How to analyze previous year questions, how to make solutions, putting example of previous year questions. Satyanarayan, so your query is the easiest to answer as I told you earlier, and I'll show you the schedule once again. As you know, our entire Target Prelims 2023 program also has topic or subject based discussions on previous year questions. So you don't have to worry about that. We will come here, each and every teacher will come subject by subject. We will be discussing previous year questions as well, analyzing them for you. So please make sure that you attempt these as well. These will be live on YouTube from 15th of April to the 15th of May. Evening 7:30 to 9:30. So your problem of how to analyze previous year questions, what can we learn from them, we are solving that problem for you. You don't have to go anywhere. You just have to come here from the 15th of April. Previous year questions, we will take that up. Don't worry about that. Then I have a question from Asif. I'm a BYJU'S student. I'm relying on current affairs on webinars, weekly current affair magazine. Is it sufficient? Yes, it is sufficient. If you are our student and you have been attending all our current affair webinars of Tuesday and Thursday, and if you are focusing on the current affair magazines religiously, you are good to go. You don't have to look anywhere else. Don't worry. Then I have a question from Anand Krishnan. 12th NCERT Biology, 3 chapters are enough for ecology static portion, not environment, specifically ecology. Yes, they are good enough. Read about that, but again, try and supplement that with current affairs as well. As I told you, in a lot of current affair magazines, usually you do get the background story as well of the static portion, so that will be helpful for you going forward. Then I have a question from Pavani. How to make notes for science and technology and environment and ecology. Again, Pavani, if you are planning for the 2023 attempt, I do not think this is the right time to now make notes. Notes making would be helpful if you are planning for the attempts later on. Also, the answer to this how to make notes really depends on student to student. Notes making is a good exercise for various reasons. Number one, you get this in a concise manner. If you read from the books, you get a very detailed story. When you concise that in a short form in your notes, it becomes easier for you to revise. Secondly, when you make notes, you also get answer writing practice. You start writing stuff. You start to write a long paragraph in 1 or 2 lines, so it helps you later on. But how to make notes, that depends entirely upon you. For example, let's assume you are reading about PSLV, that is the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle. Now, if you are someone who can just write one line about PSLV and remember everything, then you have to just write that one line. But if you are someone who wants to make very detailed notes, who wants to revise it in a very detailed manner, then also it depends upon you. There are some people who don't want to make notes, that is also fine by them. There are some people who make online notes as well. There are many people, for example, who make notes online. They save it on Google Drive so that they can use their phone or their laptop anywhere they want, and they can revise that whenever they want. It's very convenient for them. So there are a lot of options of how to make notes. It depends mainly upon you. What are you more comfortable in, and how much time are you willing to give to it? My advice is making notes is good. How elaborate or how concise they are, that depends on your reading style only. Then I have a question from Rakshit. Is 1 year enough to clear this examination? It depends on what you are doing in that 1 year. If in that 1 year you are still, let's say, working, you still have something else that you are preparing for, in that 1 year, if you are just reading for 2 to 3 hours a day, then the 1 year might not be enough. 1 year of your time may not be equivalent to 1 year of someone else's time. So I would say, if you are preparing for the examination without any distraction, you don't have any other job, you don't have any other exam that you are preparing for, you're not a college student, and you are preparing diligently for 1 year, giving at least 7 to 8 hours a day or even more, then 1 year is good enough. I personally know students who have prepared for 1 year diligently, and they have been able to get very, very good ranks below 50 as well. So yes, 1 year is good enough, but depends on how you use that 1 year. If you're sitting in front of the book and thinking that you are reading that, but in your mind there's something else going on, you're thinking of something else, what will I eat tomorrow, what movie will I see, then that 1 hour or 2 hours of book reading will not count. So it depends how much time you're spending. But yes, I can advise you, 8 hours a day for 1 year would be good enough for anyone to clear the examination. but be true to yourself. If you're being true to yourself, if you are not really thinking that I'm reading but you're not reading completely, you would be very easily be able to clear the examination. Then I have a question from someone whose name is Student of the Year. The question is, please tell me previous year question of prelims is better or test series is better conducted by the institute, which is more important. So basically what happens is both are important. I'll tell you why. Previous year questions are not repeated by UPSC. So if UPSC, for example, has asked a question in the past, they will not repeat it. Whatever question has been asked has been asked. There is a 0.1% chance that maybe a question gets repeated, and that is also in static subjects such as history. So in history you might see a question get repeated, but usually you will never see a question get repeated from previous year papers. So when we say that you should go ahead with previous year papers, read them, it doesn't mean that you should read them because the question will be repeated. No. Previous year questions are important so that you can actually understand what is the level of questions being asked by UPSC, what kind of questions are asked, so that your preparation can become better. So previous year questions are not really a part of the preparation because they can be repeated. That is not the case. Previous year questions are important because they tell you the pattern. They tell you what kind of questions are asked. So that is number one. This is where I would advise attempting test series is very important, because attempting test series can actually ensure that you are able to practice whatever you have learned so far. I am not saying that from test series the questions will come copy paste in the prelims examination. They may or they may not, but attempting a lot of test series actually helps you in putting yourself in the pressure situation. So previous year questions, yes. Even if you don't study all the previous year papers, you are fine, don't worry about that. Previous year papers are mostly about understanding what are the types of questions asked. Test series is mostly about challenging yourself and putting yourself into that situation, whether you are able to solve questions or not. Then I have a question from Cop's Life. Test series takes a lot of time. How to approach you suggest? Okay, I'll give you a suggestion. Many people might not agree to it, but that is what my personal advice is about test series. Please listen to this very carefully. If you are solving test series, my advice usually is always that solve 50-55 tests at least. I know solving a test takes a lot of time. For 2 hours you will attempt it, then you will see the papers, you will then see the explanation part, you will understand. It will take a lot of time. So my advice usually is, when you have only 1 month remaining, or let's say when you have only 40-50 days remaining before the prelims exam, then I would suggest in those days don't solve the test series. What do? You have the paper, just read the question and read the answer. Read the question, read the answer. Read the question, read the answer. Because I know solving a test series, analyzing it, reading the explanation takes at least 5 to 6 hours. I know it is very time taking. So what I usually do is, I would usually advise you that in the end, when you have only 1 month remaining, only 40-45 days remaining, in that time, don't solve the test. Take the test, read the question, then read what is the answer. Read the question, read what is the answer, so that you can just see what are the kind of questions that are asked more and more. But only do that if you have already attempted test series in complete, you have attempted 40, 45, 50 tests at least, and then come back. Then the remaining time period that you have, you can utilize that by just reading question, answer, question, answer. I'll take a couple of more questions before we end this. Soumya has a question. If one is 100% sure answer any 50 questions, should one attempt 50 questions or more is required to attempt? Soumya, you cannot leave 50 questions unattempted, because trust me, even if you think you are 100% sure about 50 questions, that will never be the case. Even if you're 100% sure about 50 questions, at least 8 to 10 will be wrong. Trust me, because the questions are formed in such a manner. Even the best of people who attempt the examination, even the toppers, they are never 100% sure about more than 40 questions. Usually 35 to 40 questions is where you are 100% sure. Remaining, you have to choose those papers, those questions where you have doubt between two options. My advice would be, under no circumstances the number of questions you attempt should be less than 70. Less than 70 should never be the case. If the question paper is very tough, you can stop at 70. If the question paper is easier, go ahead with 80, touch 85 also. But under no circumstances, leave 50 questions. Please make sure that you attempt at least 70, because again, at the end of the day, doesn't matter even if you're 100% sure, there will be some answers that will go wrong. So please don't attempt only 50 even if you're 100% sure. I'll take one more question. Which part should I read? Current affair like application or aims? Both. When you're reading about, for example, government initiatives, international conferences, make a table. In that table, write about the initiative or the scheme, then the aim, the application, what is the target audience, who are they targeting, these kind of things. So all that should be your agenda going forward from the current affairs. Please, I would advise you one thing before we conclude this. Rather than thinking about what can I leave, because many people have this question, sir, can I leave current affairs? Can I leave general science? Can I leave this? Can I leave that? Etc. etc. That should never be your first way forward. Your first suggestion that I will give is, the first attempt should be to try and cover this as much as possible. If you are thinking that, okay, I don't have enough time, I would have to leave something in the end, then decide, okay, I will leave that position. Let's say I will leave general science, etc. But don't think in the beginning that I will leave this part, leave that part. Leaving something can happen at the end as well. So please make sure that decision to leave something is not taken very early. Take that decision at the end. Having said that, that concludes my session. You have the session tomorrow for history. Remember, history session will be from 9 p.m. and not 8 p.m. Do join us for that as well. After the history session, the action then would shift on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app, where we will be discussing over 400 of the most important topics that remain in the news from different subjects. Please make sure that you are with us till the end of phase 4, and your preparation for the Civil Services Prelims examination will be much better than anyone else. Thank you so much for joining. Have a good day ahead. Bye-bye. Jai Hind.